Hey, what's up? This is P.Ellis, and this is my method for changing and tuning a batter side snare drum head. Right now I have a controlled sound. It's perfectly fine, but for the purpose of this video I'm going to put on an Evans HD, and I've never used this in my life, so this is also kind of a demo of the HD. And so yeah, first of all, take off the old head. I use a dry cloth, just some sort of like cloth to wipe down and actually dump out if there's any dust or debris on the inside of the shell. I'll use my shirt, but yeah, just wipe the inside of the hoop, get all the dust out, take your new drum head, put it on there, and finger tighten all of the tension rods. Okay, and I'm actually going to set this down here on the ground so I can get some more elbow grease into it. And what I do is I just press down on the rim and then finger tighten it on every one. And I do the star pattern. The star pattern, if you don't know, is just start at this lug, go directly across from it. With a 10 lug, you can even skip a lug, but I don't. So you go to there, go to there, go to this one, then you go directly across, so on and so forth, until you have tuned all of your lugs relatively the same tension. And again, this is just finger tightening part. So I got all my lugs tuned up, finger tight, nice and loose. So what I'm going to do now is turn the snares off and just tap about an inch away from each lug and kind of see where it's at. And I'm going to be tuning up because I know that it's too low for me right now. And honestly, I just use my ear. Half the time I use my ear, half the time I use my feel. I just feel and see what the pressure is next to each of the tension rods. And especially like if I'm in the middle of a set playing and I can't do the whole and try to listen to the tune, then I'll definitely just kind of nonchalantly feel around, and I can tell which ones are a little bit looser than the others. And that sounds really good, but I don't have that much experience with Evans drum heads, but I know that the Remo drum heads, they actually need to be stretched a little bit. So what I normally do is I just take the palm of my hand, put kind of almost my full body weight in there, but I really don't think the Evans ones need that little stretching. So, because that sounded really good. But the reason I stretch my Remo drum heads is just if you don't pre-stretch them, it's a lot like putting new guitar strings on a guitar. If you don't actually stretch them, but while you're tuning them and tuning them up, whenever you start playing them, they're just going to all go out of tune. It's the same thing with drum heads. You want to get them to where the stretching is done whenever you play on them, so they stay in tune when you play them. But let's check this out again. I do it really fast because I like what I hear. And I like that sound. Tighten my little snares. that's a great sounding snare drum head. So, you know, like I told you in the beginning, I'm used to Remo Ambassador coated, but this is an Evans HD, and I really like it. So for the resonant side on the snare drum, or the snare side, the way I tune this, man, there's really no science behind it to me, because the way I tune it and what I picked up kind of from a Stanton Moore clinic is, you know, well, Stanton Moore cranks his bottom snare drum head, and the reason he does that is to get as much snare sensitivity out of his snare drum at any, you know, volume or any tuning range. So, you know, I kind of went with that idea, and I do crank it pretty high up there. I mean, it's really tight, and they're all the same. I don't, you know, some people do these two tighter than the rest of them to give them the sensitivity from their snare. But yeah, I just crank them all up really tight, and again, I'll tap tune and tune them all up to the same pitch. And really, you just gotta, you know, you gotta experiment. But that's kind of how I do my snare bottom head. Just crank it. And you know, one thing to keep in mind, you know, most people know this, but there are some drummers that will try to put, you know, a snare drum head on here that doesn't go on the snare side of a snare drum head. So they'll end up putting, you know, an Ambassador clear, which is made for a tom, instead of one of the really thin snare side heads. So yeah, the way you can tell is if they're like paper thin, that's for the snare side, and if they're clear and they are holding their shape when you touch it, then they're not for the snare side. So yeah, little tip, and hope that helps.